Alice and I are always looking to be more healthy, and we were just talking about how fasting is one of the best ways to do that, but it's so hard. But the great thing about Prolon is that's not what you're doing. It's not that you're not eating for 5 days. Instead, you're using their science-backed program to convince your body you're fasting.
You guys, this 5-day program really is amazing. It comes beautifully packaged and it does all the thinking for you. Each day is its own box. And by following their program, I know I just feel so much better. And I can't wait to experience Prolon Next Gen and continue to see results. For a limited time, you can be first in line to experience the new Next Gen at special savings. Prolon is offering the Prosecutors listeners 15% off site-wide plus a $40 bonus gift when you subscribe to their 5-day program. Just visit prolonlife.com/prosecutors. That's PROLONLIFE.com/prosecutors to claim your 15% discount and your bonus gift. prolonlife.com/prosecutors.
I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors. Today on the Prosecutors, when a prominent Guatemalan lawyer is shot down while riding his bike, that's bad enough. Then the video surfaced, and the entire government stood on the verge of collapse. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Prosecutors. I'm Brett, and I'm joined, as always, by my intraprendente co-host, Alice.
Wow, Brett. No idea what that multisyllabic word meant, but
It means
I
resourceful.
hope it's good.
Resourceful.
Resourceful. I'm glad you picked an awesome word because we have an awesome case today. I think when we first started researching this case, I literally texted you and I was like, this is stranger than fiction. There are a few times where like real life stories are even better than any book you could ever read. And I remember when this was happening in real time even. It took more twists and turns than I could have even imagined in real time. Didn't know we would have a podcast many years later and would get to cover it.
That's funny. I don't remember when this happened, and I'm not sure how I missed it, but we're going to tell this story today. It's the story of Rodrigo Rosenberg. It's a story from Guatemala, but don't let that scare you away because it is one with more twists and turns than you can imagine. Never really heard this covered on any shows except I've heard Mr. Ballin do it, but there is a fantastic New Yorker article if you're into long form journalism. There's a David Grann article called A Murder Foretold, and it's amazing. Very helpful in researching this. This is one, we don't often do a lot of sort of narratives, but we're going to tell this in more of a narrative style because that's how this story needs to be told. And it's one that if you don't know it, is going to leave your mind blown. And if you do know it, I think you're going to enjoy it anyway. So Alice, is there anything else you want to say before we dive into this wild one?
No, but hold on to your hats, folks, because this narrative, this is exactly the way it should be told. Because as it unfolded in real time, it took the twists and turns. You're going to live through basically what the whole world lived through as it was unfolding. So, I mean, this is just great.
So we're going to take you back to 2009, and on May 10th, 2009, Rodrigo Rosenberg Marzano, he climbed on his bike and decided he was going to go for a ride down the roads and streets around his home. And as he pedaled through the streets of Guatemala City, an assassin was waiting on him. And that assassin shot him in the back. Rodrigo fell to the ground, and the shooter walked up to him and fired 4 more shots into Rodrigo's head. This guy wasn't playing around. He wanted to make sure that Rodrigo was dead. The killer disappeared, but he'd done his job. Rodrigo was left behind, fatally wounded. No one could imagine who would want Rodrigo dead. But on the day of the funeral, the video appeared, and it brought Guatemalan politics to its knees.
In many ways, Rodrigo Rosenberg Marzano had it all. The father of 4 children he doted on, Rodrigo was a corporate lawyer in his home country of Guatemala. His practice was booming, and clients sought him out for the most difficult and most lucrative cases. He'd earned degrees in law from both Harvard and Cambridge University. He was a child of wealth and privilege, and his family had long had power and privilege in the impoverished nation of Guatemala. But Rosenberg also had a passion for justice and for fighting the inequality and corruption that plagued Guatemala. His stark sense of good and evil frustrated his friends, who wondered how high he might rise if he weren't so stubbornly principled. Still, his principles didn't hold him back too much. He argued successfully in front of the Guatemalan Supreme Court and was the vice dean of its most prominent law school. Clearly a man of respect, prestige, and he had it all.
And Rodrigo also had many friends, and one of those friends was Khalil Musa. Musa had been an immigrant from Lebanon who had risen from nothing to one of the most wealthy businessmen in the country. He was also known as an honorable man who didn't take bribes and refused to be corrupted. Khalil was 76, and he was often accompanied by his daughter, Marjorie. He had difficulty getting around because of his advanced age and his failing eyesight. Now, Khalil had a regular schedule. In the morning, he would visit one of his factories. Then at lunch, Marjorie would drive him home. And on April 14th, 2009, he made just such a trip. But unfortunately, his regularity would cost him his life. While stopped at a red light, a man approached the passenger side, indicating he had a question. When he had Khalil's attention, he pulled out a 9mm and shot Khalil and Marjorie dead. The shooter jumped onto a motorcycle driven by an accomplice and sped away.
And murder in Guatemala is not unusual. 100 people are murdered every week in the country. In 2009, it was safer to live in Iraq than Guatemala, and a whopping 97% of murders in the country were unsolved. As a result, lynch mobs are common, which exacerbates the problem, and half the country is not really under the control of the government. So in the grand scheme of things, Khalil's murder wasn't all that unusual. But for Rodrigo, it was utterly devastating. Rodrigo was friends with Khalil, but probably what hurt him even more was that he was in love with Marjorie. 5 weeks before she was murdered, they'd made plans to be married. A few days after she was buried, Rodrigo received a gift from Marjorie from beyond the grave, as if in a movie. A wedding ring she'd secretly made for him arrived for him.
Yeah, and you can only imagine how devastating that was. And if you're out there wondering, I wonder why Guatemala is so troubled and has so many problems. Well, ladies and gentlemen, your tax dollars at work. Like so many unstable nations in this hemisphere, the good old CIA had a role to play, having performed a coup about 50 years ago to overthrow the legitimately elected government in order to put in place the Banana Republic, literally the United Fruit Company's selected president who would benefit their business deal. I'm sure that in the vaults of the CIA, there is at least one decent and good thing that they've done that was beneficial to the United States and maybe even some other country. But it's a mystery to me which one that is. So that's Guatemala for you. Guatemala is in a really bad place, very violent, and even someone like Khalil, who is incredibly wealthy and well-respected, is not above being murdered, and that's what happened here. And the type of murder, you can tell, this wasn't a random act of violence. They didn't walk up to him and rob him and then shoot him. This was an assassination. He was assassinated by someone, though the reason was unclear. Now, at this point, Rodrigo, he's devastated, and he wants to know why this happened. He became convinced that despite a massive outcry from the Guatemalan elite, the deaths would never be properly investigated. So he went to work. He tapped into his network, which included people on the fringe of the dark side of Guatemalan society. Spies, former rebels, death squad leaders, people who knew things no one should know. This included Luis Mendizabal, a man who was as close to Guatemala's James Bond as you could imagine. Mendizabal got Rodrigo a copy of the security footage from outside of Khalil's factory the day he was murdered, and it wasn't long before Rodrigo identified a man who was acting as a lookout, waiting for the moment Khalil left on his daily trip home. The video also caught the murder itself. It was precise, calculated, and well planned. This was no random assassin, Rodrigo decided. This was the state security apparatus at work. It was then that Rodrigo recalled a key piece of evidence. Just before his murder, Khalil had been nominated to 2 powerful government positions, including a seat on the board of directors of the Rural Development Bank, or Ban Rural. Now, he was also nominated to, the coffee thing, but the coffee thing wasn't as important as the Rural Development Bank would be.
And Ban Rural was perhaps the most important institution in the country, although I agree with you, Brett, coffee might be the most important for me. But the reason Ban Rural was so important was it was closely tied to the president, Alvaro Colom. And in fact, its most important functions were directed by his wife, Sandra de Colom, a force in her own right. And before his death, Khalil had sought Rodrigo's advice about taking the position he'd been nominated for. Rodrigo had warned him not to do it. Politics was fraught with danger. Rodrigo, in his position in society, had seen this time and time again, and he cared about his friend. But Khalil believed taking the position was important, not for him necessarily, but for the entire country. He hoped to bring an ethical approach to a board that had been marked by corruption. A brutal campaign against Khalil followed, including anonymous threats made against his life, really just preceding his death.
And you could imagine how important an organization like this would be, Ban Rural. I mean, it's all of this money is going through it. It's ripe for corruption. It's ripe for money laundering. It's ripe for stealing and doing all sorts of bad things. You probably won't be surprised to know that in Guatemala, there's not a whole lot of rural development. So it's a little unclear where the bank's money's going. And this is just the sort of slush fund you could expect. It would be hard to keep people from stealing from. So this notion that you're going to have Khalil, who everyone thinks of, the immigrant who comes in with nothing, he feels like he owes so much to the country. He's come from poverty. Now he's wealthy. He's not the kind of guy, if you'd like the board of directors, to continue to look the other way as you're doing various things you probably shouldn't do. So it's not surprising that he starts receiving these threats in connection to joining this bank. Obviously, the fact that he then ends up dead is a clue that Rodrigo can't really get past. But he continues to dig. And it wasn't long before he was reporting back to Mendizabal that he was getting threats as well. Rosenberg told friends that he was being followed. And he gave a phone number to Mendizabal that he believed one of his stalkers was using to threaten him. Then he received a call from Gustavo Alejos, who was the private secretary for the president of Guatemala. And he had a simple message: stop looking, or the same fate that befell Khalil would be Rodrigo's own. Rodrigo told his friends that he was soon to be killed. He wasn't going to stop. This was something that was more important to him than his life, and it was more important to him than anything else that he'd ever been through. He drew up a will, and then he sat down and recorded a video.
I mean, this is like a movie. You're watching. You see what's about to happen. You see what happened to Khalil. You see these threatening messages coming. They're not baseless if they're coming kind of from the highest places within government. And Rodrigo knows that these threats are not empty, which is why he goes so far as to draw up a will and record this video that will be at the center of what is going to happen. When Mendizabal received word that the end was near for Rodrigo, he begged his friend to leave the country, just save yourself, get out of here. And Rodrigo told him he would do that. He just needed a little more time to gather the information he needed to give to the International Criminal Court. On Sunday, May 10th, Rodrigo took a quick bike ride around his neighborhood. Shortly after he left his apartment, he met his killer. The capital was utterly shocked. Khalil's death had led many to believe that no one was safe in Guatemala, and Rodrigo's death confirmed it. But it was his funeral that would change everything. Mendizabal gave a eulogy, and when he did, he said, "Everybody here loved Rodrigo Rosenberg, and all of you are wondering why someone like Rodrigo, who wouldn't hurt anyone, was killed. Well, Rodrigo left me with the answer. It was then, you don't see this at every funeral, but Mendizabal revealed that Rodrigo had left a recording behind, and he began to pass copies out to all of the mourners."
One of those copies ended up in the office of the president. As President Colom, his wife, and his secretary gathered around a television, someone hit play. On the screen, Rodrigo appeared, face to camera, wearing a blue suit. He was also wearing the wedding ring that Marjorie had sent him. And this is how he led off. This is a long video. It's about 10 minutes long. You can find it on the internet very easily. And obviously it's in Spanish, but there are many translated versions that have subtitles so you can read it as well. But here's how he led off. "Good afternoon. My name is Rodrigo Rosenberg Marzano. And alas, if you are hearing or seeing this message, it means that I've been murdered by President Alvaro Colom with the help of Gustavo Alejos. The reason I'm dead, and you're therefore watching this message, is only and exclusively because during my final moments, I was the lawyer to Mr. Khalil Musa and his daughter, Marjorie Musa, who, in cowardly fashion, were assassinated by President Alvaro Colom with the consent of his wife, Sandra de Colom, and with the help of Gustavo Alejos."
If that weren't fiery enough of a start, it goes on, as Brett said, for another 10 minutes. These are serious allegations lobbed from the very first minutes of this beyond the grave message.
You talk about dying declaration, and this is
this is beyond dying declaration. I mean, it's interesting. Would it actually qualify for dying declaration? Because he's not under the threat of death at that very moment, but he makes it knowing that if it is ever played, it will only be because he is dead. That would be an interesting.
That's a fascinating question.
You know what I mean? Like no one has a gun to his head, but he is making this only with the anticipation that it will ever be shown if he is in fact dead, and he would only be dead if he were murdered. So
those of you who are curious about the answer to that question, go listen to our 3-part series on hearsay. Legal briefs.
There you go. In the video, Rodrigo recounted the history of death that plagued the country, and he urged the people to rise up against the government that was oppressing them. He stated that he had personal knowledge of definitive proof of the president's involvement in Khalil's murder. He explained the conspiracy to eliminate Khalil before he could discover all of the corruption at Ban Rural, most of it perpetrated by Sandra de Colom, the president's wife. He then called upon his countrymen to rise up. This is not your typical, this is who did it sort of video. I mean, it is a this is who did it video, but then the bulk of the video is actually a battle cry for everyone of what next. Silence and inaction was allowing this murderous regime to continue and thrive, Rodrigo said, and he went on to say it cost him his life. For if anyone was watching this video, he knew he'd been murdered. The ones left behind would have to save Guatemala because obviously Rodrigo giving this charge in the video was already dead. Rodrigo demanded that the vice president take over the country and the Coloms resign.
You can imagine Thanksgiving dinner at the vice president's house with the presidents. It's probably not going to be that fun that year. You know, if you're the president, you're like, okay. Oh, well, who you been talking to, VP? I thought we were in this together, right? But that's what he's saying is that's what should happen. And as you can imagine, Guatemala was in shock. And so was everybody in the president's office watching this video. Alejos, who was the president's secretary and the supposed mastermind behind this plot, immediately told his wife and his family to flee the country. Meanwhile, the video was getting popped into DVD players all across the country and then very quickly being uploaded to YouTube, so much so that it crashed all of YouTube's servers in Guatemala. At that point, the national television stations began airing the video. The people in the president's office, they're scrambling. What do we do about this? We have to do something. We have to say something. There's some talk about, should he address the country? Should he go out and say something? But that's not what they decided to do. Instead, they issued a statement. And the statement was very bland, basically said this is all a part of some plot to undermine the government, and the president had no involvement. But those of you who remember the Arab Spring started with someone who actually self-immolated, lit themselves on fire because of the corruption in Tunisia. When something like that happens, the words of politicians don't tend to have that much power. And here you have a guy who is making a video saying, look, if I don't make it, it's because I've been looking into the president and all his corruption and all his wife's corruption. And if I'm dead, it's because they killed me. And then you coming out and issuing a statement, just a piece of paper, saying, oh, no, this is just some plot. Not going to have maybe the effect that you wanted. And in fact, instead, it added fuel to the fire. At this point, the Tsunami Blanco began. Thousands of protesters, dressed all in white, flooded public squares across Guatemala, and in particular in Guatemala City. And they were calling for one thing: the resignation of the entire government.
This message comes from Greenlight. Ready to start talking to your kids about financial literacy? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app that teaches kids and teens how to earn, save, spend wisely, and invest with your guardrails in place. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Join millions of parents and kids building healthy financial habits together on Greenlight. Get started risk-free at greenlight.com/Wondery.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only. Then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Bombas makes the most comfortable socks, underwear, and T-shirts.
Warning, Bombas are so absurdly comfortable you may throw out all your other clothes.
Sorry, do we legally have to say that?
No, this is just how I talk, and I really love my Bombas.
They do feel that good. And they do good, too. One item purchased equals one item donated.
To feel good and do good, go to bombas.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY at checkout.
And now, while it may seem like it's Rodrigo's video that sets the country ablaze, it really is the spark. All of this had been simmering under the surface. 100 people were getting killed a week with really no recourse. The murders were unsolved. No one was investigating. There were the incredibly rich and then the incredibly poor. There was really no middle ground in Guatemala, like a lot of countries, actually. Those who rise to power have all the power. They have all the wealth. They have all the land. They have all the positions on these, Ban Rural and board of directors of anything that's important in the country. And then there's everybody else. So really, there had been a lot of this temperament simmering underneath the surface. And then to have someone who is from the prestigious part of society be taken out because he was looking into corruption of his fellow prestigious members is the spark that lit the Tsunami Blanco on fire. Colom was unassuming, slight, not an imposing or really an impressive guy. He wasn't the sort of person you could imagine as a South American strongman ordering the murder of his opponents. But he was the exact kind of puppet you could imagine being dominated by his wife and power behind the throne's advisors. Colom decided to go on CNN and defend himself. Again, if you thought that piece of paper that he issued trying to tamp down the outcry that came about because of Rodrigo's video, I would say that his appearance on CNN probably just added even more fuel to the flame. He really didn't impress. The Guatemalan press thought he was lying, and his accusations about Rodrigo, shot down in the streets, was part of a plot to discredit the government, was just outrageous. One media leader said the whole thing was repugnant, and he wouldn't be surprised if the next thing Colom told them was that Rodrigo went down kamikaze style, paying the assassins himself. That's a wild allegation, right? It was really a no-win situation for the president. Anything he said at this point, other than building a shrine for Rodrigo and admitting that everything Rodrigo said was true, was just going to inflame the public and the media. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those, they have these people called crisis communications people. It's a very interesting area of politics. I dabbled in it briefly. But essentially, you have these things that happen that are make or break moments. Kind of like lawyers will sometimes do, what do they call it? Bet the company litigation, where, yeah, like if you lose, that's it. Company's going out of business, right? And that's sort of what you have here. You have a situation where things are quickly spiraling. People already don't trust the government. And it's interesting because Colom was one of the first left-wing people elected in Guatemala in a long time. There had been a lot of sort of right-leaning strong men who had been in Guatemala. And then Colom comes along, and he sort of is supposed to be this guy who's going to reform things. He takes over, and nothing really changes. But because he came from sort of a different political position, he's already unstable. There's already a lot of people who want to see him go down. And they're already primed to distrust him. So he issues that statement. The statement's weak. It doesn't really say anything. And then he decides to go on CNN, but he basically just says the same thing. But this time it's coming out of his own mouth instead of being written on paper. And it's even worse. And so all the people who are already primed to distrust him even more. And it really puts the entire government in a situation where they are on the verge of collapse.
Amidst calls to resign, Colom threatened that accusing him of murder was sedition. You can imagine, when the country is already like flooding the streets in protest dressed in all white, calling for him to resign, them being called sedition by Colom is not helping whatsoever. Armed security forces descended on critics' homes, arresting and detaining them. Again, this is not going well. This is, if anything, making people resist even more, because this is exactly the type of oppressive government, corrupt government that they are protesting. Twitter and Facebook became the rallying points for dissent. Film projectors showed Rodrigo's video on loop in public squares across the city. What I'm envisioning, even though I saw this in real time, like on CNN, this is like the Hunger Games, when like everyone outside the Capitol is revolting and everyone's taking to the streets, and there's videos on loop of like Katniss doing her Mockingjay salute.
That's a really good example. Yeah,
Thank you. I'd like to think that they actually took that from Guatemala. I'm not kidding. When I saw, I don't know when the movie came out. It might have been right around the same time. But I remember watching like Mockingjay and being like, this is kind of like Guatemala. In other words, there is almost nothing the government can do right now to earn the trust of the people, because everything they do is just showing the people how corrupt they are. They're coming to arrest us because we're speaking out against them. They are doing everything to maintain power, even if it means continued murders of our, countrymen left and right with no recourse. The government was on the verge of collapse. So in step the Americans, because we can't let Guatemala fail.
I owed them one at this point, I think. But, I mean, this is a situation, obviously. Guatemala is on the Mexican border. It's right at the beginning of Central America. Obviously, the United States has a security interest in really the entire South American, Central American region for all sorts of reasons. I mean, you guys are familiar with immigration issues and all that. A lot of people who come to the United States are from Guatemala. Guatemala is a popular place that people migrate from. So having Guatemala collapse is not in the interest of the United States or of Mexico, who's one of our closest allies and obviously our neighbor. So we don't want that to happen. And we see it looking like it's going to happen, and it doesn't seem like Colom and his advisors have any idea how to stop this. So Washington sends the ambassador to Colom and gives him an ultimatum. either turn over the investigation to the UN International Commission Against Impunity in Guatemala, which was a group that had been working to reform the country from the inside and deal with some of the issues that had plagued Guatemala for a long time, not just corruption, but also the long-lasting legacy of the purges and the political murders and everything else that had happened in Guatemala over the last 30 years or so. So either turn it over to this organization that's very well respected or lose the support of the United States, which means your government's going to collapse. The United States turns on you in this situation. There's nothing for Colom to do but resign and maybe flee with his life. Rodrigo's brother had earlier demanded that the case be turned over to this organization, the International Commission Against Impunity. We need like a better word for that. We'll just say the UN. He had demanded that it be turned over to this UN organization. And if Colom was innocent, after all, what did he have to hide? So at this point, Colom really has no other choice. And he agrees to do this, to turn over this investigation, to take it away from the Attorney General of Guatemala, who everybody knew was corrupt, and give it to this independent organization. And that means it's all going to fall on Judge Carlos Castrasana, who was a former Spanish prosecutor and judge. And he was universally respected around the world and in Guatemala. I guess universally is strong because he was immediately targeted for assassination, really had been targeted for assassination since he took over this organization.
If you can't tell, everyone is like a target of assassination, which is why the country is rising up in protest. It seems like no one is immune, not the rich, not the powerful, not the poor.
Yeah, they wouldn't let him walk outside alone. His security detail was massive. It was made up entirely of foreigners because they couldn't trust anyone in Guatemala not to be an inside man who would take him out. At least one member of his team would be gunned down during this investigation. But Castrasana was as relentless as his reputation. During this investigation and sort of the investigations that surrounded it and were other parts of the UN's charter in the country, Castrasana removed 1,500 corrupt police officers, 50 police commissioners, the deputy director of the National Police, a dozen prosecutors, a magistrate judge in Guatemala City, and the attorney general of the entire country, who Castrasana would demand Colom fire. So this is a guy who really is cleaning house. You can see why he would be a target for assassination, and you can also see why he was the kind of person that people trusted to get to the bottom of this. And if it turned out the president was involved, he would not be afraid to say so.
I mean, who's left at this point after he's cleaned house? And he hasn't even finished his investigation. This is all ancillary to the whole point, right? He's supposed to try and figure out what happened to Rodrigo. And in the process, he's removing 1,500 corrupt police officers, 50 police commissioners, the attorney general of the country. This is the definition of cleaning house. Still, solving the Rodrigo Rosenberg case was daunting, and the government was a constant threat. While interviewing one witness, a horde of police burst into the room and attempted to seize the man. Can I just pause for a really quick second? We spend a lot of time talking about conspiracy involving corrupt police officers in United States cases. And a lot of the times we try to explain why these conspiracies are incredibly harmful to the victims in those cases, to the justice system, and to the continued workings of a law enforcement system, because what corruption really looks like is this, right? I'm not saying there are not corrupt police officers in the United States, but we are talking an entire system that cannot be trusted. And look, we don't have a perfect system here, but when every single investigation becomes a police sort of conspiracy, it does massive amounts of damage because we are making light of what corruption really looks like. You guys have heard me talk about this before, but my family's immigrated from the United States, and we saw what police corruption looked like, where people would be intimidated against testifying in court, where because of your last name or the way you looked, or because you didn't raise your hand to support some politician and they didn't like it, you would be sent off to labor camps. right? Those are realities of like the rest of my family. And I somehow, by like the grace of God, was born in the United States. So again, we will be the first ones to call out police corruption in the United States. But listen to what's happening here. This is 2009. This is not like 50 years ago. This is in very recent history when Twitter, well, still Twitter, so I guess it's a little old. It's not X. But this is very recent history. So as they're trying to figure out what's happening, what do you do when you're figuring out what's happening? You interview witnesses. The police are literally bursting into rooms and trying to seize witnesses so that Castrosana and, the investigators can't talk to these witnesses. And what do you think is happening to all the other witnesses? Talk about a chilling effect. They're not going to want to talk to anyone because they're about to be seized and thrown into a dungeon. So, agents grabbed this man and they fell back into an adjacent room. This wasn't some passive, like, hey, you shouldn't talk to him. Guns were drawn. They told the police they'd have to kill them all. This was a standoff between a very corrupt police who's always gotten their way by strong-arming the rest of the society, and Castrosana, who was like, you know what? Everyone wants me dead anyway. I might die, but you're not going to stop me. Because if not me, then who? And the only way this whole standoff was able to be resolved was a call by the vice president himself, directing the police to stand down. This is just one witness. They're literally interviewing thousands of witnesses. If they're removing 1,500 police officers, they're interviewing tens of thousands of people to get to where they are. And we're talking one witness.
And I think it's hard to overstate what you said. Everyone would have heard about this. Everyone else that knows something that might want to talk to this investigation would know this happened. The chilling effect of doing something like this, even though at the end of the day, the vice president was able to head it off and stop this guy from just being disappeared. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say if the police had gotten him, you never saw that guy again. And who knows what happened to him after this, too, is the other thing. You talk about needing to get out of the country. At that point, that guy needed to get out of the country. But yeah, huge chilling effect. And this is the atmosphere that this organization is attempting to investigate this murder under.
Kind of against all odds, the investigation continued. Security footage revealed a black car trailing Rodrigo on the day he died. Remember when Rodrigo was investigating his friend Khalil's murder and he got that security footage and he also saw someone essentially being a lookout? These are not random acts of violence. These are well thought out, planned events. That's what security footage is showing. But here's the thing that's weird about Rodrigo. The day he was murdered, that bike ride wasn't part of his normal routine. So if the car was waiting on him, it made the team wonder if someone who knew Rodrigo had tipped them off. The police focused in on the car. It took them weeks, but they finally found the owner, and his cell phone activity indicated he was in the area of the murder at the time. And the owner of the car and phone was William Gilberto Santos Divas, a former member of the National Police Force.
Dun, dun, dun.
So many twists and turns, I told you.
Now, this could cut one of two ways. On the one hand, it was possible this was a sign that the government was involved in this murder. But it was also possible that the killers were from the right-wing opposition, intent on using Rodrigo's investigation against the government. Remember, as I said earlier, Colom came from the left wing. He wasn't popular on the right, and there was a lot of people who wanted to bring him down. And in fact, one of these people was Luis Mendizabal. And he had been a part of a cabal to bring down the government before. And in fact, he had orchestrated at least 2 failed coups. The man who had recorded Rodrigo's video was Mario David Garcia, who was also an ultra-right-wing politician and a former presidential candidate himself. Maybe Luis and Garcia killed Rodrigo after making him believe that Colom was behind the murder of his love. Now look, it was quite the conspiracy theory, but as Alice said, conspiracy theories in Guatemala, a little different from conspiracy theories in the United States. After all, the CIA had done similar things in Guatemala before, and in some ways, this was right out of that playbook. If anybody could do it, it was Mendizabal. Then there was yet another twist. The First Lady revealed that she had a witness who would unlock the mystery. This witness, who met investigators on the Mexican border under a shroud of secrecy and a promise that there would be no press and no one outside of the UN organization involved, said that he knew that a gang named Pythagoras, which is a really sophisticated name.
I was going to say, it's kind of like the Pythagorean theorem.
Yeah, exactly.
That's literally how it's spelled.
I mean, I don't know why they didn't call them the Illuminati or whatever, had killed Rodrigo for $180,000 at the behest of none other than right-wing General Otto Perez Molina, who just so happened to be the chief political rival of President Colom. Now, when the UN folks heard this, they were immediately skeptical because this seemed too perfect for the government. And the meeting was supposed to be in secret. But no sooner had it finished than investigators were surrounded not by the police, but by a gaggle of press reporters. Headlines blared that the killer of Rodrigo had been found, and it was the leader of the right-wing opposition.
I mean, this is the ultimate fingers pointing across everywhere, right? Of course, those who are, have been pointed at Rodrigo saying, Colom killed me, Colom and his wife killed me. Of course, they're going to say someone else did it. Like, who is telling the truth here? But Castrosana was so furious, even more so when the elaborate ruse collapsed. Castrosana filed official protest with the UN, but he continued his investigation, albeit now critically hampered by distrust and skepticism. Still, Castrosana had Santos Divas, and his agents were quickly zeroing in on the criminal organization of which he was a part of. It was an elite gang of professional hitmen made up of former members of Guatemala's elite special forces and police. That they had killed Rodrigo was certain, but they're hitmen. So who ordered them was the key, and that was what Castrosana was focusing in on. Investigators turned to wiretaps, listening to thousands of conversations between the gang members, and they were circumspect, though with one saying that no one should discuss the Rodrigo Rosenberg job, given the number of important people involved. I mean, dun dun dun, right? What? I mean, of course we know it's important people involved, but here you have these professional hitmen basically confirming what we know. They were hired by important people to kill Rodrigo. But right-wing important, left-wing important, wealthy important, police important, and why? Right? Why were they asking these gang members to do a hit on Rodrigo? Investigators in coordinated pre-dawn raids arrested all the gang members. I mean, that's one strategy, just arrest everybody when you don't know where to start. Usually you work up the chain. You arrest the low man on the totem pole, you flip them, you go up the chain until you figure out what's going on. They have no idea what's going on, so they just arrest everybody. It wasn't long before they started flipping on each other, though, so I guess their tactic worked. And on their clients.
And the UN guys, they had a problem, which was they were listening to all these wiretaps and picking up on various things the gang was going to do, like kill people and rob banks. And so they were constantly foiling these plots. And eventually the gang was like, we got a mole. Somebody's ratting us out. And then they started making plots to kill each other. And once they started talking about killing each other, then the UN guys were like, okay, we got to shut this down.
Just get them all.
Yeah. And this happens in real wiretaps all the time. The number of investigations that come to an early end because the wiretap picks up a hit are a lot.
I'm not giving advice on how to evade law enforcement, but if you ever think that you're being wiretapped and you want it to be shut down, just threaten to kill somebody. Not kidding.
That's true.
I mean, sorry, I'm not trying to give illegal advice, illicit advice here, but it's just true. And here's the thing.
Have one of your associates do it so that they'll shut down the wiretap
so they don't come arrest you. But here's the thing. You see why this is something you have to do as a non-corrupt law enforcement agency in the United States, because when you know someone's going to die on your watch, you got to do something about it. But number two, what do you think like highly dangerous cartels are doing all the time? Threatening to kill each other, guys. This is why these wiretaps get shut down all the time.
The hitmen weren't hired by right-wing mercenaries or members of the president's cabinet, but by two of the most prominent businessmen in Guatemala, Francisco and Eduardo Velez Paez, owners of a large pharmaceutical company. And they weren't unknown to Rodrigo. In fact, they were the cousins of his first wife. The assassins had been told that Rodrigo was an extortionist who needed to die, and they were given exact instructions on where to find and how to kill Rodrigo, down to the shoot him 4 times in the head. So the motive was clear, if simple. Relatives of Rodrigo's ex-wife had decided to kill him, probably as the result of some sort of familial dispute, right? Simple on the surface, but it made no sense with even minimal investigation. First, there was no evidence Rodrigo had extorted anyone, and the men, although related to his ex-wife, were described as loving Rodrigo. They were some of his closest friends. Even after the divorce, they remained as if they were family, and this confused investigators.
They really couldn't understand it. With the evidence in hand, they could arrest the cousins, but there was something that nagged at them. Instead of wrapping things up and declaring a victory, they decided to keep looking. By the way, that's a mark of a good investigator. This happens in so many investigations where it seems like your evidence all leads somewhere, but things just don't add up. And that's when you keep digging. And thank goodness they did. They had the phone number that had sent Rodrigo those threatening phone calls. Between May 5th and May 10th, the day Rodrigo was killed, he had received multiple calls. And the phone that they had only communicated with Rodrigo and the hitmen. So whoever had the phone was the key. The number, of course, was a burner, but investigators were able to find the store where it was purchased. But it had been paid for in cash, which might have dashed any hopes of discovering who had purchased it. Way to go, whoever thought of this, to avoid paper trail. But in one of those twists that only happens in true crime, the purchaser had been required to sign a sales tax slip for the phone. And wouldn't you know it, he used his real name, Luis Lopez Florian, Rodrigo's close friend, driver, and bodyguard. Rodrigo had been betrayed by the closest, quite literally closest to him. If he hadn't signed the sales receipt, I don't think we would ever know what happened. And by the way, am I the only one who does this? I never sign my name on my receipt. Am I the only one who does that?
I mean, I just make like a few dashes. Like I don't.
No,
yeah.
like I make a concerted effort not to write anything that resembles my name on the receipt. Because here's the thing, the receipt is really for you. It's for you to verify whether you did something. So I do the same thing every time, or not every time, but I know it's me. So that if I had to look at a receipt, I would be like, yes, that's my signature, or like, no, that's not my signature. So if anyone ever actually signs my name, it's forged because I never write my name. Part of it is I never want someone to pick up my receipt. This is probably just working in like law enforcement for too long. I never want someone to pick up an errant receipt or to copy my signature or to do anything with like my name on it. Am I paranoid? Anybody
when I'm
else?
buying drugs or paying for my hitman, I don't sign my name. I always,
or a burner phone.
Or a burner phone. No, I mean, I'm just because I'm lazy. It's like there might be a B, maybe. And then it's just like a line or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Not
Anyways,
with you,
so I
but this
can't believe
guy-
he really writes his name. Right? Especially when, like, you're buying a burner phone. It's not like you're at the grocery store and they somehow track you down and you bought some celery. This is the phone that ties it all together.
And I'm going to go down a limb and say whoever was running that store wasn't like, I can't make out your signature, sir. Can you do this more legibly? Oh, and can I check your ID to make sure this matches? I mean, come on. It's like anything else. There's no way. But this guy, for whatever reason, decides he's going to write his actual name. So this is the break the investigators need. It has finally come. So Lopez Florian was arrested, and he gave a full confession. He told investigators how he became part of the plot, who had instructed him, who had sent him to purchase the phone and deliver it to the hitmen. He told investigators about the $40,000 that had been paid to the hitmen, and he told them who had provided the cash. And the investigators listened, stunned and incredulous, at the utter unbelievable story they were hearing. According to Rodrigo's driver, bodyguard, and good friend, the man who had ordered the hit was none other than Rodrigo himself.
I didn't realize that Alec Murdaugh was a aficionado of Guatemalan history when he ordered the hit on himself. And this sounds unbelievable, right, guys? I mean, police didn't believe it. I barely believed it when I heard it. But then they found the $40,000 check from Rodrigo to the Paez brothers. But maybe the check was stolen or forged. Maybe, there were the calls. This doesn't make any sense. All the calls to Rodrigo, the ones that were threatening him, they were all placed from the same location, inside Rodrigo's own apartment. The call is from inside the apartment. I mean, quite literally. So, two had the final call, informing the assassins where they would find their target. President Colom's theory, remember at the very beginning when he first took to the airwaves to defend himself, and he kind of threw out this theory of a kamikaze bent for Rodrigo ordering the hit on himself to take down the government? It turned out to be true. Rodrigo had ordered his own assassination.
Rodrigo, it turned out, had decided that the politicians he believed had killed his beloved would never be brought to justice through traditional means. The only way to bring the killers to justice was to do something extraordinary. He would frame the guilty.
Castricana knew two things. One, as outrageous and unbelievable as this seemed, it was the truth. And two, no one would ever believe it. But when he met with Rodrigo's son, Eduardo, he did believe it. And that belief gave Castricana the courage to move forward. Castricana delivered his findings on national television. He delivered a thorough, documented report, and the truth won out. Some of Colom's most intense critics declared that the investigation was beyond reproach. But Castricana wasn't done. He still wanted to know who killed Musa. Was it the government? Because remember, that's kind of the domino here that falls and creates this tsunami blanco after Rodrigo frames the guilty. The investigation would outlive Castricana's tenure at the commission, but it would reach a result. Musa, it turned out, wasn't quite the upstanding businessman he'd presented himself to be. And it wasn't as salacious as maybe we thought. It wasn't because he was going to be the most ethical board of director member of Ban Rural that he was going to turn the corrupt country around. Because in fact, he was part of the corruption. He had dealings with criminal networks, which to be fair, was almost required to do any sort of business in Guatemala. A dispute with one of them over money had led to his murder. The government, it turned out, had absolutely nothing to do with Khalil's murder.
Which is not to say that members of the government were innocent of all wrongdoing. In 2018, Colom and the former members of his cabinet were arrested for corruption, including defrauding the state of $35 million. Colom would die under house arrest in 2023. His wife, Sandra Tomez, the political mastermind during his presidency, divorced him in 2011 to avoid a law preventing her from running for president herself. I mean, if that's not love, what is? It's like a love story for the ages. She ran 3 times, coming in second each time. In 2019, she too was arrested for corruption, though she beat the charges. As of 2024, Guatemala ranks 154th out of 180 countries in the world for corruption, just behind Iran, tied with Iraq, and slightly better than Afghanistan, and significantly worse than when Rodrigo Rosenberg took his own life.
I mean, this is all... I really had to sit back and be like, why? Rodrigo did not do this, did not order his own assassination because he loved his country. He did it because he loved a woman who he believed had been killed by the country. And when I thought about it that way, it made a lot more sense that it was more of a love story than a love story for his country. And the fact that Castricana's investigation later on figured out what resulted in Khalil's death makes this even more tragic because not only did Rodrigo die for nothing, in a sense, I mean, it did. A lot of corruption was uncovered, but it didn't get better from there. Maybe there was a cleaning of house at the time, but the corruption ran so deeply that it just continued. If anything, I kind of feel like they rooted it out. They were called out because there really was corruption. And because this case wasn't the one that was because of corruption, it gave them even more authority to continue the corruption, which again, I hate to always bring this back to it, but in a lot of ways, in my mind, this is what happens when we focus all the wrong attention on like wrongful conviction cases. There are really wrongfully convicted people, but if we pour all of our energy into like the wrong case to be the flag bearer for a cause, it actually ruins it for the cause. And the very fact that Guatemala today is more corrupt than it was in 2009 when Rodrigo ordered his own death to hopefully fix the country for a woman, unfortunately points to that. You know, if you make something the exemplar and it is the wrong exemplar, it oftentimes makes things worse.
And I think you're absolutely right. I think that's probably something that is missed in all this. The people of Guatemala believed in Rodrigo in a way that they had not believed in anyone for a long time. They didn't believe in the politicians, any of them. They voted out the right-wing guy, put in the left-wing guy, you know, different guy, same story, right? And all of a sudden they have a guy they can believe in, and it must have just been absolutely devastating to all those people who had shown up all in white in the squares to protest the corruption of their government, who believed in Rodrigo, the people who had gone to prison for this, for sedition, the people who had talked to the organization, the UN organization who was looking into this, and been their lives threatened. And you could just imagine what they felt when these findings were released. Sure, they had the truth, but man, I mean, this was a case where the fiction was so much better than the truth. The story they believed up to this point was a story that could save the country. But once they found out the truth, it doomed it even more because, you know, at that point, Colom is untouchable for a while, right? Because who's going to believe he did anything? He could just be another one of these cases. His critics have all been made fools of. They believed in this thing. So yeah, I mean, this was just cascading bad effect from this. And Rodrigo, whether he thought he was doing the right thing or not, he was willing to give his life, as you said, for the love of a woman, for her memory, for justice for her in his mind. And it turned out it was all a lie. And she was completely innocent. I mean, she was an innocent person. The bullet actually went through Musa and hit her and killed her. He was always the target. Just an absolute tragedy, but one that I think has a lot of lessons, as you said, and just is an incredible story from the outside. Well, look, that's a lot different from what we normally do, but we like to do different things every now and then to keep it, you know, keep you guys on your toes. So I hope you enjoyed that. Crazy case, great case. Like I said, wonderful New Yorker article that goes into even more detail about all of this stuff than we talked about. Read it if you have a subscription to New Yorker, if you can use one of your free reads. It's a wonderful article. We'll link to it. And then Mr. Ballin, who you guys know I love Mr. Ballin. That's actually how I learned about this story, was from the Mr. Ballin, I think his podcast did this one a few years ago. And it's been one that I've always wanted to do ever since I heard about it. Now we had the opportunity to do it, so I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let's do some questions. If you have any listeners from Guatemala out there, write in. Let us know how things are going in Guatemala these days. Okay. M wants to know, is there a case you did on the podcast where you were 100% sure one person did it and by the end you changed your mind? Okay, let's see. So I would say I just assumed that JonBenét's mother did it, and I completely changed my mind on that one. I assumed going into the Leo Schofield case that we would conclude that Leo Schofield had done it. Completely changed my mind on that one too. Those are probably the two where I felt pretty confident where we would end up at the end, and then ended up in a completely different place.
I 100% thought we would just make fun of the owl in the Michael Peterson case. Like, I really thought that was going to be like a Yeti did it, the aliens did it sort of theory. So that's not quite I knew exactly who was going to do it, but I thought we were going to make fun of that theory. And in fact, I really bought into it.
Yeah, I remember when I first mentioned the owl theory to you, and you did.
I laughed
literally
at
laugh
you.
out loud. You did.
And then when I watched it on the documentary, I laughed again and paused it and called you and laughed at you again. Like, I really thought it was a joke. I thought you were kidding. And then I couldn't understand why, like, a lawyer who seemed really smart was talking about it on the documentary. And then when you seemed to be taking it seriously, I was like, are you punking me?
Okay, so this person has asked us 3 questions. This is Sophie. Sophie wants to know, I'll start with the first one. We should have made a 1-question limit, but we didn't do that. So
We didn't do that. So this
we
is
didn't
not a
answer the
retroactive.
5-parter at the one
We don't do
time.
post hoc
That's right.
reasoning here.
Exactly. That would be an ex post facto law. We can't have that. Okay, if you guys could have a conversation with anyone living or deceased, who would you talk to, and what topic would you like to talk to them about?
I'm just going to pick a fun one. I'm not, like, there's too many, and we could be here all night. So I will pick one that I've always wanted to talk to. I don't know this, if I only had one, I would ever only speak to her. But I've always wanted to have dinner with Lucille Ball because she did so many firsts as a woman comedian, woman producer, woman writer, marrying someone who was outside of her social and ethnic class, and was pregnant, like first ever on TV, and had to get every episode of I Love Lucy. By the way, she found out she was pregnant like right before filming. So like it was all set to go. And then normally they would have just canceled the show, but she like got every script approved by literally a rabbi, a priest, and like a Presbyterian pastor in order to make it on TV. And they had to do things like never say she was pregnant. Just things like that where it was like, so she wasn't even trying to be this like amazing woman example. She just was, which makes her so awesome. And I think she's hilarious. Like to this day, her shows make me laugh harder than just about any like comedy. So I love her. I've always loved Lucille Ball. I think she is one of the coolest examples of any woman who wants to break glass ceilings. And I would love to sit down and talk to her because I think she'd just make me laugh all night.
Man, there's so many great answers to this. I'm not going to cheat and use any like victims of a crime or anything. I'm going to do that. You know, like, I think it would be cool. Obviously, there's all the famous people like Winston Churchill or George Washington or anything like that. H.P. Lovecraft would be high on my list. Talk to H.P. Lovecraft about his theories and how he wrote and everything. But I think I would be really interested to talk to my ancestor back in like 1695 or whatever, who was the first person to come to the United States. And I think it would be really interesting to talk to that person about why they did that and what motivated them. Because I've always thought, what a just crazy thing to do, right? To get on a boat and go all the way across the ocean, leaving everything you've ever known and everyone you've ever known behind forever. There's no going back. Like, what would drive you to do that? I think that'd be a cool person to talk to. So I'm going to say that. I'm going to say
that's a great one. That's a fantastic one.
Great Grandpappy Brett.
Grandpappy Brett.
To see why
I do think
he
about
decided to
that
do
all
that.
the time. Like, I have new respect. You know, everyone grows up being like, whatever, my parents. But I think about that with my parents all the time. Like, I literally cannot believe you left everything. Your language, your culture, your friends, the street you grew up on, your food that you eat to come here. Like, not because you liked it better here, you know? I can't imagine me right now with everything I have, picking up everything and just moving to any country, even an English-speaking country. I can't imagine it. So I think that's a great one.
Well, it's funny because you hear Elon Musk talk about how going to Mars is going to be a one-way trip and there won't be any coming back. And people are always like, who would want to do that? And you think about the fact that everyone did that. And every person who really, the whole age of colonization, like everyone who left, that's what they were doing. It was a one-way trip. You were never going back. So I don't know. That's a good
question. That's a good answer and also a good question.
So no. Okay. So next of the 3-parter, what is something?
3-parter, man. Yeah,
I told you it's 3 questions. Ooh. What is something in the top 5? You're the one who said we can't have an ex post facto law.
I know. I just didn't really think about it beforehand.
What is something in the top 5 of your bucket list? So give us something in your bucket list, Alice, that you want to do before you shuffle off this mortal coil. Yes.
Jeez. I mean, I used to travel all the time. Like, I would travel internationally twice a year by myself, like it wasn't fancy. I'd stayed in hostels, and I just loved, I guess, being outside of my comfort zone, learning things, seeing more of the world. And being a lawyer, having a podcast, having a family really puts a damper on that. So I hope one day again, I can travel the way that I did before, which was like, it was not pretentious. It was not in resorts. It was not like, I would just like to walk the El Camino. That's like one of many things I would like to do. I would like to spend multiple months living on a Greek island and living there as opposed to just traveling. But the strictures of life right now prevent that. So that is on my bucket list, to be able to travel again.
The travel is definitely my bucket list thing. I've done a lot of the things that I wanted to do, as you said, before we had kids. We seeing the pyramids in Egypt, that was always top of the list, did that. Going to Chernobyl, did that. That was awesome. But the one place that I would love to spend a lot of time that we've never been is India. I would love to go to India and spend a lot of time in India and see really all of India. India is sort of my great white whale of travel. It seems so intimidating to go to India because it is such a big and diverse country, and there's so much to see there that we've just never gone. I mean, we've done all these things. We've traveled around the world, but we've never gone to India. So India is going to be very high on my bucket list. I mean, I don't have things like jump out of a plane or something like that. To me, I like to eat, to drink, and to travel. That's what I like to do. So in any order, I want to go to India and eat.
We'll take the podcast on the go. We'll go travel and we'll go podcast.
Okay, the last question. If you could pick, now this is great. I love this. If you could pick a superpower or superhero, what power would you want, or who is your favorite? So on the superhero thing, growing up, I was always a big fan of Superman. I always really liked Superman. As I got older and more darker in my view, then I liked Batman. I question whether Batman is a superhero as opposed to just like a guy with a lot of money who could buy a lot of cool stuff, sort of turn himself into a superhero. Where obviously Superman, his disguise is Clark Kent. He is a superhero at all times.
He was like wildly good looking.
Wildly good looking, yeah. So there's always that. If time travel can be considered a superpower, that would be my superpower that I would pick without question. Time travel, that would be so awesome.
Mine is time travel adjacent. It would be that I can be anywhere in a moment. Like, that's the one thing about having lived all over the country, is that I've made all these friends in all these places that I almost never get to see. And it's because distance is what keeps us from being close to each other. I live literally coast to coast from my brothers. So I would love to be able to be like, okay, I'll be over in a second, and literally like pop over to Texas, pop over to California, pop over to New York. And then really it's to be relational, so I could actually see people, because I love people, but we live in a place that is really hard to get to anywhere. And so that's like time travel adjacent. It saves you time, but it allows you to have more time with the ones that you love.
That would be awesome. That would be a great superpower, particularly in this age when, it's not like the old days where you grew up with people and you all live together for the rest of your life. Like, all my friends are to the winds, So that would be.
I was trying to schedule like a literal 24 hours with like 5 of my closest girlfriends, because it's been a long time since we've all been together. Lots of life events, babies being born, all these things. And we cannot find 24 hours in which all 6 of us can be together in the next year. That's crazy, right? Yeah. It's because we live all over the country.
Yeah, in my time travel thing, it would be fine. I'm fine with just being an observer. Like, I don't want to have the power to change things. I want to do that. I want to mess with the timeline. That's,
You're butterfly effect kind of guy.
Too much, exactly. Too much burden to bear. But being able to see and sort of experience things throughout history, and also unravel a lot of mysteries. I absolutely would go to Dyatlov Pass and see exactly what happened to those people, but like that kind of stuff, or go like, to the George Washington's inaugural address, or that kind of stuff. Or, go see Star Wars when it first came out. Like, any of that stuff would be cool. So I think time travel would be awesome. But yours is right up there. That's a great one. It's a great one, too. Okay.
Well, those were some good questions. If you're going to make a 3-parter, at least make them great questions like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Nailed it. All right, guys. Well, this has been fun, as always. If you have any thoughts on today's show, shoot us an email, prosecutorspod@gmail.com, @prosecutorspod for all your social media. If you want to leave a question, just leave a 5-star review on Apple or iTunes, and we will read the question for you. So I want to remind people who complain about the questions are entirely additional. They do not take away time from your podcast enjoyment. They just add time to the end. People complain about everything. It amazes me. But let us know what you think. Thanks to everyone on Patreon for continuing to support us. You guys are amazing. We love you very much. As we record this, we'll be seeing many of you in just a couple days. By the time you hear this will have happened a while ago. But CrimeCon is this week in just a couple days. We're very honored to have been nominated again for the Creator of the Year award. I have last year's award right over my shoulder. I'm going to have to move those books over a little bit if we win it, to give it
Guys,
give some
I haven't
space
touched
for
the award since Brett stole it from me the night of the award. I haven't touched it. That's not an exaggeration. We live 10 minutes from each other. He locks that room when I come over.
You can come over anytime and come up here and hold it. That's fine. We can have visitation. That's fine. Well, we're up against some really great podcasts this year, so I may just have to let Alice have custody of ye old award. So we'll have to see. But thank you to everyone who supported us and voted for us and got us here. You guys are great. You're the reason we keep doing this. We love doing this for you guys. Y'all are amazing. This show has always been about y'all. It always will be about y'all. So keep sending us your recommendations for cases you want covered. We'll be starting a new case next week. Alice, do you have anything else you want to add before we sign off?
No, this was actually an enjoyable case because there wasn't really a perpetrator except for the person who ultimately was the victim. So I like this. It's kind of nice. A palate cleanser, shall we say.
You could really do an entire podcast on this event. Like, you could do a great serial style podcast on the Rodrigo Rosenberg case, what led to it, the historical antecedents to it, the consequences thereof, the investigation. I mean, you could do amazing things with this, and maybe somebody will, and I would definitely listen to that. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. We'll be back soon. But until then, I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the prosecutors.
Okay. Has my sound been okay? I turned it down.
Sounded fine to me.
Okie dokie.
I'm sure Jason would tell us if there was a problem.
Okay. I weirdly hear like an undertone
of hostility towards you from me.
Word. What?
Yeah, I can see that.
And I don't know if like you can hear it when you play it back. I don't know.
I think sometimes that's just in your headphones. Like,
It
I
might-
had
yeah.
some, and
Okay,
I
that
turned
might be.
down the
The
far
sound.
right switch.
Yeah.
The far right switch.
Maybe that's what it is. Okay. I was going to let you just say Guatemala. Guatemala, YOLO. Happy Memorial Day, y'all.
Okay. The hitmen weren't hired by right-wing mercenaries or members. You know, it's been a long weekend. I'm sorry. Really, it's Jason who suffers here. I'm sorry, Jason.
I'm sorry, Jason. We should never record on holiday weekends.
Okay.